We should now be live on YouTube. And in just a second, we should also be live on Mixer. Hopefully.
It looks to be live.
Yep, we do appear to be live on both. That's fantastic. Let me pop out the chat. Hello, everyone. We'll be starting in just a second, as normal. I did forget to tweet out that we were going to be live today. I bumped it like 3 times. So. How do I pop out this one? There we go. Pop out
I'm going to try to squeeze in our names. Let's see.
Look at Dan putting in effort.
I always put in effort. Good news. We have enough space.
Hooray. That means I can retweet it from a notification. I don't have to open the app.
All right, tweet is ready. Let me mute the YouTubes.
Someone's saying apparently we're head-to-head with the Windows Weekly podcast this week. Are they streaming on a Friday this week?
I have no idea.
How dare they? Today's our day.
I only watch my channel.
Yeah.
I live in my own bubble.
Windows Weekly is a good show. It's a nice haircut, Zach. Thanks. I actually don't like it. I think it's too short on the sides. So we'll have to figure that out. Also need to open up the Windows blog so I can talk about 19H2.
I need to... Zach knows this. I need to check my weekly. How old am I?
I like how you check it weekly.
Oh, not a good week.
Oh. What was it?
Damn. Last week I got down to, I think, 30 or 31. And this week it was like 39 from one angle.
Ooh, that's almost accurate.
I know. Yeah. It's because I got a shave. I didn't get to shave for this trim up. Oh, well.
Right. What time is it? Still got a minute. Wow.
Wow.
Bill is apparently watching both Windows Weekly and the Windows Central podcast. How are you listening to both? I can only concentrate on one thing at a time.
Sounds complicated.
Only one person has said hello in the Mixer chat, so that's a good start for Mixer.
I feel like you actually combed your hair due to a comment we had last week. People making fun of how we both had messy hair.
I didn't see none of those comments. Now you've just ruined my day. Thanks, Dan. I don't care. I actually don't mind the bedhead look. I think it looks good. Right. Yeah, we can start.
Okay. Get the tweet. Tweet is sent. Close that. Let me retweet. Close that. All right, I'm now recording.
I am now recording as well.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 152 for October 11th, 2019. Hey everyone, Dan Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. This week we're talking Windows 10 19H2. Scratch that, it is now officially called the Windows 10 November 2019 update, which, yes, it's we're still sticking with these boring titles, which is fine. This is not an exciting update per se, but we'll kind of go through about what we know about it and when it's coming and if you want to get it now and all that cool stuff. Also talk about Donna Sarkar leaving the Windows Insider program. So not a huge story for us, but we'll talk a little bit about it as well as give a shout out to them as they always work so hard over there. We're going to talk about why the Surface Neo runs Windows and a Duo runs Android. This is I would say this is a controversial topic, but it's really a controversial topic for like the 0.1% of Windows Phone fans who are still clinging on to this idea that Microsoft could somehow resurrect Windows Phone were they just to put 10X on the Duo, but we'll kind of go through that as well as the reverse. Why not put Android on the Neo, since Obviously, Microsoft doesn't have a problem with Android, so I'm sure we'll have a spirited and vibrant discussion about that with lots of people commenting in about how we're traders and all that, but that's fine. Also, what's the plan with Windows 10X? So as of now, it is officially just for dual screen PCs or screens that fold in Lenovo's case, but is there more to that story? Zach will tell us. I feel like we should have a little cryon shooting across the screen now, but we're not that ritzy over here. And finally, a Surface Watch. There's actually technically no evidence that there's a Surface Watch in the making, but we could have also said the same thing about Surface earbuds. We only heard that they were coming. In fact, Surface headphones were the same too. So that said, Microsoft does sit on a lot of patents for wearable technology. And I made the argument this week that if they don't do some kind of Surface wearable type device, the Surface Duo becomes a little bit weird. It's not going to be the end of the world, but it just seems to be highly unlikely that this team is not seriously thinking about a wearable. So we'll kind of go through about my thoughts on that and what it would actually take to make such a device and unique in today's market. Zach, how are you doing on this fine fall? Is it fall officially yet? I think it's pretty close.
Yeah,
October.
I think we're close. I'm okay. I'm quite tired today. It is Friday. It's been a long week.
It has been a long week.
It really has.
Even though, like, I feel like, I don't know, and I didn't accomplish as much as I wanted to, but that's always the case.
Yeah, usually the week after a big event, it's always like, ugh, it's just slow and ugh. But yeah, no, I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there as well. It's a blustery day over here in New England as fall is rolling in, but that's okay. Butterball, my outdoor cat, who I'm trying to bring indoors. I'm getting close. I gotta get him into a box, or I actually have a kennel to bring him to the vet to get him all checked out because cats have what's called FIV, and he may have FIV, which is fine. It's survivable. That doesn't really do anything to them. But I have an indoor cat who's well, she's not super old, but she's a senior, and you can't just mix and match those things. So
Yeah.
I gotta work on that. But I'm pretty excited. He's out though in his I have a house for him that I built, and it's heated, so he's very cozy right now, just sleeping out there. But kind of glad to do that. But hopefully, that if you guys want to follow the Adventures of Butterball, just go to my Instagram account. I occasionally post updates. But let's get to the meat and potatoes, what everybody wants to talk about here. So let's start with a little kind of boring thing, I guess, at first, which is the Windows 10 November update, which is not an exciting feature update, but it is sort of a more interesting optimization update. And there are some nice features here, including your phone, which is probably the biggest feature. In fact, we saw some updates to your phone this week as well. But why don't you walk us through what we should expect for what was called 19H2?
So yeah, Microsoft uncharacteristically announced that 19H2 is ready for release this week. Microsoft, for some reason, has never done this for Windows 10 releases. They have been very adamant that Windows 10 is never done. And as such, whenever there is an RTM build of a feature update for Windows 10, they've never confirmed it to the public. I mean, we've known there's been RTMs. I have to do a bit of digging internally, asking a few sources. Hey, this is still the RTM build. I heard that it was supposed to be signed off on this day. And then I'd get information back and sort of have to work out which build is the RTM and whatnot. But Microsoft made my job easy this week just by saying, yep, this is it. A build 18363.418 is the final build of 19H2. This is considered the RTM build. And this will be what rolls out when 19H2 begins rolling out in November. Now, Microsoft hasn't announced a release date specifically for this update. It is called the November 2019 update, so the general consensus is it will roll out at some point in November. I would guess the second week of November. I'm going to guess. Yeah, the second week of November, I think, might be the most likely place for that to roll out. But anyway, regarding features for 19H2, because I know a lot of people have been saying, 19H2 has nothing in it. That's technically not true. It has a couple of things in it that were backported from 20H1. So if you've never been testing 20H1 at all, then some of these features will be new to you. But if you have been on 20H1, then nothing here will be new. So changes such as being able to add events to the calendar directly from the calendar flyout on the taskbar. So if you click into the time down at the bottom right of the taskbar here, you'll now be able to add things directly to your calendar through that UI, which is kind of nice. There's also been some minor improvements to how notifications work and how you can configure those notifications. So there's now thumbnails and some UI tweaks in the settings app that allows you to change which apps show up in the Action Center, how long they're there for, and so on and so forth, which is nice. There's also a quick link to manage notifications in the Action Center now at the top right, which is also a minor change. But other than that, most of the things in this update are under the hood. So if you are interested in this changelog, you can go to the Windows Insider Programs doc at docs.microsoft.com, and they have a changelog there for version 1909. It's pretty funny how this is coming out in November, even though it's version 1909. When Microsoft announced this version of Windows, they did say it was targeted for a September release. They missed that, but you know what? I'm okay with it because they told us it was done, and that's all. Listen, I didn't have to talk to 4 different sources to confirm which build was the RTM this time. They just did my job for me, and I really, really appreciate that. So the RTM build is confirmed. It'll be rolling out in the next few weeks. I'm going to guess November 11th. And that will be that for 19H2. And we can all focus on 20H1/20H2 because I'm actually pretty sure November is when we'll get our first manganese build in the Insider program. The skip ahead ring will open back up, and then they'll start that process again. So that's going to be very, very exciting. But yeah, that's pretty much it for 19H2. That's finally an update coming very soon. I should also briefly mention also how this is going to be delivered, because 19H2 is special in the sense that if you're running 1903, 1909 is just a sort of patch that sits on top of 1903. So when this update is available to you, it will download like a cumulative update and will install like one. So it's not a huge download and it doesn't take as long to install. But if you're coming from 1809 or earlier, then it will be a full feature update. It will download a full build, which is like 3 gigabytes and whatnot. It will take about 15 minutes to apply to the system, depending on how fast or slow your computer is. And then you'll be up and running on 1909. So that's pretty much it for 1909. It's overall a kind of nice update. It's very minor, but to be fair, it's a service pack for 1903 and just makes 1903 a better OS. So I'm all for it.
Does it seem faster? Is the question I want to know. I've been running on quite a few devices, and I've been saying for a few weeks now that you could probably just install this on your main machine, as it's not going to break anything. I can't account for obviously old machines. You never know what's going on with things 2 to 3 years out, but we haven't heard a lot of issues here. In fact, quite the opposite. They should be sort of fixing and optimizing a lot of these devices. But for me, it's been fine. But I am struggling to figure out, I don't really appreciate all the nuanced stuff, as we well know when it comes to design. I'm pretty much not picky. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I guess it's a kind of cool update, and should be shipping with the new Surface devices. I'd be curious. It's always the question. They always time these things. I doubt very much. So there's probably the new Surface devices probably won't come with the November update out of the box.
That'll be 1903, yeah. Which is fine, because like I said, 1909 is literally just a patch that sits on top of 1903. So it's not like a huge update that users will have to do on day one, which is quite handy. But yeah, a lot of people have been asking me on the subject of builds and releases of Windows, like, what's the deal with 20H1? Is 20H1 basically feature complete at this point? Are we expecting any huge new features to show up still? And as far as I'm aware, no. Now, I will be honest, I've not really been paying much attention to Windows desktop development ever since Windows 10X, as we know it now, sort of took off internally. I've been following that more than Windows Desktop. To me, Windows Desktop's pretty boring these days, so I don't really ask about it anymore. But as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure 20H1 is, air quotes, feature complete. I don't think we're going to see any huge new features added to 20H1 between now and when it ships.
I imagine just things like your phone, and they seem to be really focusing on sort of the connectivity and how it connects to other devices, and sharing and all this may be sort of tweaked and worked upon. But yeah, nothing to. And hey, Snipping Tool's been getting tons of updates. So they've been doing all sorts of stuff around that. And there's that new feature, right, where when you click a little pen, the little window pops up instead of the big one with all the inking options. So they've been definitely refining things. and I think in a positive way, based on sort of user feedback, trying to make things a little bit more simple. So that's always good.
Yeah, app updates could still see some big changes coming because they're not tied to the OS. They can show up whenever they need to. But talking about like OS specific features, I don't think we're going to see any more for 20H1. Regarding 20H2, I mean, I don't know for desktop. I'm curious if we will see some Windows 10X features show up in 20H2 for desktop, since 20H2 is also the release that Windows 10X will ship with at the end of next year. So, things like the Start menu and the new Action Center / Control Center, which we sort of saw leaked in a desktop build a couple of months back. We know it runs on desktop. We've seen it. Whether or not Microsoft is planning to release it as an official feature or just as a feature for insiders to test for Windows 10X, I don't know. But it's definitely on a technical level, it's very possible to see those features show up on desktop. So I'll be interested to see if that shows up at some point soon. But yeah, otherwise, that's basically all of the updates I have around Windows development and the insider preview so far.
Well, that was boring. I'm kidding. But this is, we are at that point, right, when it comes to Windows 10 desktop, where major innovation is probably going to be put on the back burner for what I think are obvious reasons. It's a desktop operating system that since 2015 has been getting regular bi-yearly updates. Is it bi-yearly? Is that every other year or for twice a year? I don't know how that works, but twice a year updates, let's just say that. And there's been a lot of progress there, but at the same time, there's only so much you can do with this, aging operating system that's more supporting of legacy devices. I'm sure we'll see lots of tweaks and smaller UI and shell changes as Windows 10X starts to show up on the radar going into late 2020. And I'm sure we'll see some closer alignment. In fact, we saw some really interesting 10X stuff. And, this is your story, but, what 10X will look like. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And what they're doing with 10X is really cool. Like, it's just, I'm very excited about that. But that's obviously where I think a lot of the engineering is going towards these days, and as it should. But before we get there, let's talk about the Insider Program. Donna Sarkar, who's been doing the head of the Insider Program after Gabe left. She's been, I guess, almost 3 years now, which is kind of crazy just because it seems like just yesterday, Gabe All was the one doing the Insider Program, the first, and then he gave it to Donna, and now Donna's moving on. And so Donna's moving on to, actually, I forgot the name. Do you have the article? She's doing Azure Outreach or something like that. It has to do with Power Apps. And anyone who's been following Donna for a while, this has actually been sort of her passion project. She's been, in addition to doing the insider stuff, she's always doing 9,000 things, including her own, fashion line, which is pretty incredible. But she's always been pushing this idea of getting new people into software and app development. She's an engineer herself, and she's been at Microsoft, I believe, for 14 years now. But she's always been very passionate about this idea of like getting people's foot in the door to just start making their own apps. And it's really important, especially for a lot of the countries and places she goes to are sort of emerging markets where technology is still, they're getting their first access to this stuff. And they're really the next generation of people who are going to create this stuff. And that's always been a big deal in the PC world. It's not just about the hardware that's out there, or here's Windows 10 and look at this high level app that's been out. It's about getting people into the dev world and just starting down that path, which is very important because those are the people who are going to be creating the future, especially as we move towards Windows 10X and UWP more and PWA and cross-platform app development with JavaScript and Xamarin and all this kind of stuff. So you got to start somewhere. I know she's always as we see her, she's always encouraging you and me to start making our own apps. And you and I are both like, yeah, probably that's not happening. But that's always been her passion project. And so it's always been a little weird, too. Like at some insider events, she's been sort of pushing that. And now she's switching over to doing that basically full time, which I think makes a lot of sense. It seems to be a lot of where her passions are. And let's face it, the Insider Program is like, there's no successor named yet, which I guess is a little weird. But the Insider Program is a very small, close-knit program. I think they have like less than 10 people at the core team that are working on that. So it's not like some division. But they also seem to be pretty much rolling on their own and doing their own thing, constantly evolving. We've always talked about this is an ongoing experiment, and that's why I always believe in criticizing the insider program when necessary, or at least giving important feedback. But at the same time, they're doing this massive experiment where it's never been done before. So clearly there needs to be some course corrections every once in a while. We should also point out the insider team is also the front facing part of the actual Windows development team.
Yeah.
Like Donna doesn't actually get to decide the features in Windows 10, nor does she get to decide when things actually get to flight or what's in those releases, or necessarily not even all the structure of the rings, which is something I guess they are reevaluating how those things are named. There was on the one of their internal podcasts for the Insider, they talked about how some of the people on the teams don't like the fast and slow ring denotation just because it implies like, I don't know, fast is better.
I've
right?
never liked the fast slow ring idea that they've put in place for the Insider program. Personally, I think it's kind of like it's unnecessary. I think there should be a release preview ring and there should be a beta ring, and the beta ring has the actual like testing builds and whatnot. I mean, I guess there's the slow rings there. I guess there's an enterprise play there for the slow ring and whatnot. But they should call it the enterprise preview ring and have it.
Yeah, there's definitely. I mean, again, this is something this is just the way I am in life. I don't find this stuff like, I don't have strong opinions on it. I kind of get it, but it's sort of like, I guess they could have mirrored sort of what they're doing with Edge development, which simply mirrors Chrome development, which is you have a beta, a developer, and a canary.
Yeah.
That's certainly an approach I think makes a little bit more sense, even though I would argue on the face of it, explaining to people what canary is kind of weird. Like usually, well, I get the metaphor, canary in a coal mine. It's this whole idea like you're the first one testing this new stuff. So I get that metaphor, but that's sort of a weird thing to bring into software development where people are like, so there's, beta, okay. Then there's developer, okay. Which those two things don't necessarily, like, I'm not a developer, but I want developer. And then there's like a thing called, it's named after a bird, which is just like, So I find that weird, but we're also a little bit more familiar with that. So,
yeah, I mean, the canary ring I feel like that ring would just be for people who know what that is anyway, right? Like, obviously, some rings shouldn't be for everybody. Like the release preview ring should be for most people. Like if you just want to like get things early, you go to the release preview ring, because that would be where like that would be the Microsoft Edge beta channel, for example, and then the developer ring would be the slow ring. And then the canary ring would be the fast ring. But, that's naming it at this point. They'd have to change up how, like, the rings actually receive builds as well. Like, if I was in charge, I would, like, put out a disclaimer and, like, so the top ring, the fast ring, whatever you want to call it, this ring gets guaranteed a new build once a week on Wednesday or Friday, whatever day they want. And that build might be broken. But... that's the risk you take. And then the ring below, that's the one where it's sort of a bit more curated. It's like, oh, maybe not every week, once every 2 weeks, but these builds won't destroy your computer, that sort of thing. And then the release preview ring and so on and so forth. But that's just me.
Yeah. Well, I sure will see some improvements and name changes. And the program is always going to be different no matter what happens. But
of course, we want to wish Donna good luck in her new role.
Yes.
I'm sure she's going to crush it. And also, it's probably worth mentioning, Microsoft, the announcement that they made about this, they did mention that they are now conducting a search for a new leader of the Windows Insider program. So I'd like to throw my name into the ring. And
I already did that right after the announcement. I put it on Twitter. I was like, obviously,
I have some great ideas. I'd like to take part. I assume it will be someone on the Insider team currently that will take over. Maybe not, actually. Maybe it could be someone like Joe Belfiore. I doubt it, but...
Joe Belfiore. Yeah, I think he's a little bit busy with stuff.
He's done being the public face of Windows, I think. He got burned with Windows Phone.
It's a brutal job. I mean, without getting into specifics, Donna had to have, people watch her when she was at events because
of crazy people.
Because some dudes are a little bit too, crazy. You go on the internet and you see these people, right? Well, imagine going to a public event. Everybody knows you're there and you're there. So it became a little bit risky for her. There's also the fact that she took a lot of abuse from some really angry individuals who are just off their hinge. There's no mental test to be on Twitter, unfortunately. And don't get me wrong, she's one of the strongest people I know. I mean, she gets like 4 hours of sleep and has the energy of like 15 of me. I'm like a sloth. Um, but you do get tired of that lifestyle after a while, right? I mean, there's like eventually you just want to be like, I feel that way sometimes too, even with this job. It's like right now we're going through a transition with our YouTube videos, which we'll be returning back to shooting regularly. In fact, we'll be doing, when the new surfaces, I'll have video reviews for those. Uh, but at the same time, I kind of don't miss not doing YouTube. Like, I mean, being always out there, having your face out there, having to hear yourself talk, it gets a little like you have to be a real narcissist to be like, oh, good, it's me time. So I'm sure she's got so much other stuff going on in her life right now. I'm sure her being able to sit back and take what many of us I think would be like, ooh, Azure Power Apps. It's like, ugh. But like for her, she's super passionate about it. She feels like she's making a difference, and like, um, not having to have, I don't know, dudes like threatening you or,
Yeah.
at public events would probably be a nice change after a few years. So, yeah, I feel like all this kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
It's a job you out from.
I hear Power Apps is actually quite a big deal internally, and I guess externally. It's just not something I've been following because
Sure.
I'm not a developer.
I've known quite a few people at Microsoft working in various different divisions over the years who've now switched over to the Azure team. Obviously, you guys all know that cloud and Microsoft is super important. It's one of the few areas where I feel like there's growth. But we should also mention, there's always this thing in Microsoft where when people switch out of departments, everyone wants to have that negative spin. Did
Yeah.
they jump or were they pushed? That kind of thing. But at the same time, anyone who studies Microsoft long enough and knows employees there, they're actually encouraged to switch departments every couple of years. And a lot of that is because of simple burnout. People who work the same job, listen, some people want to be an engineer working on parts of Windows, and that's all they love doing. They're good at it and they're happy there. That's fine too. But sometimes people want to try new things. And I mean, some people at Microsoft been there, 20, 25 years, and they've got by simply switching departments and trying out new stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they end up switching again. But that's how they're encouraged to do that, to keep their minds active. And so I don't think we should ever read when people leave. Even Mike Ybarra, we should give him a shout out too. Second in charge over there over at Xbox. He's been with Microsoft for like 20 years too. Really social person. He's always putting himself out there. He gets a lot of respect for just kind of, I guess, like being like me in the sense of like just telling people how it is and not really pulling punches. And sometimes telling people, not being
Yeah.
too polite, but now he's leaving, and the current consensus seems to be it's like, well, he's made it. The only other position he can get is Phil Spencer's job, and Phil's kind of crushing it right now, doing a good job, and no one really wants to see him go. So if a company comes along and goes, hey, we can give you a position that's sort of like Phil's, or gives you a new challenge and all that, I mean, it makes sense for these people to sort of take those opportunities. And you and I know a lot of people at Microsoft often get offers to go work at Amazon and Facebook because they're located right there in Redmond. And it works out for Microsoft people because what happens is Facebook pays a lot and Microsoft pays well, but you don't get this. If you're an engineer at Microsoft doing the same job as the engineer at Facebook, the Facebook person makes more, and Microsoft doesn't automatically go, oh, they're paying that, we'll match it, right? They don't do that because that'd be weird. You get to these weird budget wars. What happens though is at Microsoft, people will leave to go work say, at Facebook or Amazon, get a pay bump, maybe stay there for a couple of years, but then they come back to Microsoft, and guess what? Microsoft will now match their pay or give them slightly more. And so that's how the jig works, man. So you got to be part of that, and that's often why you see people switching these companies. And you can't really blame them. If you're making 150K a year and Amazon's like, we'll give you 220. I mean, like who wouldn't take that opportunity? But
Yeah.
yeah. So, but good luck to Donna. You and I will both see her at Ignite anyway, so we'll definitely get a bunch of selfies and hang out with her. So that'll be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me why. Why, Zach? Why does the Surface
Tell me
Neo run
why.
Windows 10X?
This is
And
such a.
why does the Surface Duo run Android? And why isn't it reversed? Or why is anything anything?
And why did I have to write this article to begin with, Dan? I think that's
Yes.
the question we should answer first. I mean, like I so this came as an actual shock to me. I was very surprised to see people asking that kind of question, and I assume it might just be people being a bit sort of like, oh, it's not running, the Duo's not running Windows, so therefore I don't understand any of it, and I'm gonna play dumb. But in case those people aren't actually playing dumb and they genuinely don't understand, I've seen quite a few questions on Twitter asking why Microsoft chose to run two different operating systems across the Surface Neo and the Surface Duo. The Surface Neo being the dual screen foldable PC that Microsoft announced last week, and the Duo being the dual screen foldable phone that Microsoft announced last week. And the answer is kind of obvious, but in case it's not, it's because one of them is a PC and one of them is a phone. The PC does PC related things, and as such needs a platform that's very good at doing PC related stuff. That platform is Windows. Windows 10X, which is what runs on the Surface Neo, is at its core still Windows 10, and it runs basically all the same apps your current version of Windows 10 runs on today. So when you buy a Surface Neo or some other kind of foldable that runs Windows 10X at the end of next year, when you open it up and set it up for the first time, you'll be able to download, Spotify or Win32 Word or Chrome. You'll be able to download those programs that you use on your current version of Windows because it's still Windows. It just has a nice facelift and a sort of decluttered core as well. Now, on the flip side of things, Surface Duo, why does that run Android? Well, it's a phone, and Android is very good at doing phone stuff. Windows isn't very good at phone stuff. The OS itself, don't get me wrong, especially with Windows Core OS and C Shell and whatnot, Windows could absolutely run and scale on the Surface Duo just fine. It would be great. The problem is Windows doesn't have the app platform for mobile. So if you were to put Windows on the Surface Duo, you'd have a great OS, a beautiful fluid OS, but you wouldn't have any apps to run in it. And for a mobile device, mobile apps are key. Not only a key, they are the most important thing about that device. You need the apps for a device that fits in your pocket and goes with you wherever you are. And that's why Microsoft chose Android, because Android has the mobile apps and is very good at doing phone stuff. That's also the same reason why they didn't put Android on the Surface Neo, because that's one other thing I've heard as well online. So if they put Android on the Surface Duo, why didn't they do the same thing for the Surface Neo? It's because Android isn't very good at doing PC stuff. Android doesn't have desktop class apps. It has phone apps. And, we've seen attempts at Android being blown up on a desktop UI and whatnot. And all that really happens is the phone UI just gets longer, and it's still a phone app at its core, and it's not as detailed or as useful as running an actual desktop class app. And that's why the Surface Neo runs Windows. And it's as simple as that, really. Surface Neo is a PC and therefore it runs Windows. Surface Duo is a phone and therefore it runs Android. And there's been so much debate online as to around the Duo specifically being Android or Windows, how there's been over 3,000 signatures now on some change.org petition that's asking Microsoft to make the Surface Duo compatible with Windows 10X. And to me, it's crazy. There's no reason to sink resources into making that a possibility for the few people who want to run Windows 10X on the Surface Duo. The Surface Duo with Windows 10X wouldn't be a phone. It'd be a PC that fits in your pocket. And that's not a device most people want. A lot of people have said to me, oh yeah, but I want to run Win32 programs on a phone, a device that fits in my pocket. Are you crazy? People refer me to the effort of putting full Windows 10 on ARM on the Lumia 950 XL, which is great at technical level, fantastic. It's very fun and whatnot, I guess. But have you tried running a Win32 program on that phone on a phone-sized screen? It's awful. It sucks.
It's like it almost doesn't scale.
No, it doesn't. That's the problem. Like the UI, the Windows 10X UI would scale, but the apps wouldn't because most of them are desktop apps and aren't designed for phone screens. Like, yes,
or
sure,
touch.
Or touch. Yes, sure. The Duo has a total of 8.3 inches, which is, up there in tablet territory, but it's two screens. Each screen is treated as a separate screen. So you're actually not getting
5.6 inch.
Yeah, you're not actually getting 8.3 inches total. Yes, they can span across, but the Win32 programs won't. There's no way. There's no way any Win32 program is going to support that spanning capability. Well, actually, maybe that's not true. But, it's just not going to... the experience would be poor. And for the few people... Because don't get me wrong, I 100% believe that there is a dozen or so people out there who actually genuinely do run that. They do want to run desktop class apps on a phone. And to those people, I say, okay, but you've got to admit it's not worth Microsoft throwing the resources into making that a possibility for the very few people who need that, because it's not useful to most people. Most people, when on a phone, want to use a phone app. They want to use apps that have been designed for that small screen. And as such, Android is the better option for the Surface Duo.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, let's talk about, I always hear people bring up they should make a dual boot device, which makes no sense. I know you and I were talking before the podcast how I feel like the word dual boot should just be banned from the lexicon, except for Mac users, because they absolutely need it. But dual booting is not practical on a mobile device. It'd be really weird to be like, I want to use this as a phone. And then it's like, oh, but I want Windows mode. Reboot, launches into Windows. And now what happens when a call comes in, or I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's just that'll never happen. There's also the whole thing that the reason you don't see a lot of dual boot devices is because companies like Google and even companies like Microsoft basically forbid it. And now Microsoft can get around that. They're making their own phone, so they could like, oh, we'll make this dual boot. But Google may be like, no, we don't want you to do dual boot. It's got to be ROS or it's nothing. Right. And that's happened in the past. There were companies, I forgot the exact which one it was, that were reportedly going to do a dual boot device, and they were told no. I wish the world was different. You and I talked about it last week. Listen, if Duo shipped with 10X, you and I both would buy it. We'd run PWA apps on it. We would convince ourselves everything's fine. Be that little burning guy in the room, that meme. This is great. Everything's fine. But we'd be such the minority. And it's not just a question of like, could they do it? Of course they could. But don't forget, that device needs to then go through the FCC. It's a separate device now. It needs to get recertified. It costs money. It's time. They need to, manufacturing would be weird because there's no real way to gauge demand. So they can maybe make them on demand, which means you'd order it and it'll come in 3 to 5 weeks or something like that. But all this is just sort of like, why? Like to appease who? This little tiny crowd. And don't get me wrong, guys. I mean, I'm on your side. Zach and I are huge Windows Phone fans, but this is just kind of the reality of it. And it's just like, now as to, why not put Android then on Neo? Because everybody's like, well, if they're already doing that, why don't you just put it on Neo? And I tell people it's the same reason why you haven't bought a 13-inch Android tablet. In fact, there's a reason why no one makes Android tablets anymore outside of Samsung, who keeps trying, although there's no evidence that they're having a ton of success. It's also the same reason why when I tell people like, well, if you just want you can go buy a Chromebook. Go buy. They're trying to make nice Chromebooks now. There's a 15-inch one Lenovo makes, and I believe they have one that's coming out to Core i7. There you go buy it. And there's a reason why I know you won't go buy it, because we all know this reason. Android apps suck once they get to a big screen. And don't forget, Google also has their own plans with what was called their own Andromeda. Now it's called Fuchsia, I believe, which is supposed to be this next-gen thing. So they're doing the same thing as Microsoft. But there's a reason why there really is this delineation between screen size and OS preference that people have known. Like, for instance, I brought up before the Lenovo ThinkPad 8. Go look it up. It was a cool device. Came out obviously with Windows 8 at the time, although it later got Windows 10. This was an 8-inch tablet. It ran, I forgot what the actual processor, and it was actually a pretty good processor if I recall. But this was like a really premium device at the time. It just had this awesome folio cover. It had a little peak fold that was magnetic, and when you folded this corner down, it revealed the camera, and the camera would turn on automatically. It was so cool, and it was premium hardware. It ran full Windows 10. It was a neat device. It was a neat device in the sense of like, this is a neat device, which it's probably not going to turn on because I haven't charged it, but the GPD Win 2, neat device. You can go buy this right now, people, if you want this. This is a full Windows 10 PC, full keyboard on it. It's portable. It has a loud fan, all that kind of stuff. So you can buy these things, but there's a reason why those are there's niche and then there's really super niche. This isn't a cool experience. I mean, it's cool in the sense of oh my God, it's full Windows 10. But I'm not grabbing this when I go out to the coffee shop, even though I keep telling myself I'm going to try. But the fact is, it's Windows works very well on anything that's sort of Surface Go or bigger. Mm-hmm. And even Surface Go is an edge case. Some people are going to love Surface Go. Some are just going to find it too small. But they did a pretty good job of trying to make that work. But then like PC, just like Windows 10 really rocks anything that's 12 or 13 inches. You go down to 8 inches, and Windows becomes pretty weird. It's not quite built for that, where Android totally is. And the reverse is true, as I just mentioned. Android, though, you put it on a 13 or 14-inch device, it gets weird. And the whole tablet thing, Apple's done such a good job with iPad, even though I would say iPad is still weird to me because especially the iPad Pro 12.9-inch one, because to me, I turn that on, just like, it's just so big. Like the stuff, the way they scale everything is just so weird. It's just not ideal, but it's a nice experience, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like all this stuff, they made the right choice. I'm on the side of everybody here. I wish it was different. I do believe 10X on the Neo. Listen, down the road, Microsoft could always make the Surface, you and I talked about this, the Surface Duo Pro. And maybe that will run a version of Windows 10X if the app story improves. Like that could happen. I don't think they will ever take the Duo for second or third generation and be like, oh, we're going to change the OS out now. They'll never do that. Mm-hmm. Maybe a Pro version if that happens. But the idea that you're going to get a mobile, the Duo running Windows 10X, just a reiteration out of Windows Phone, but now you have even fewer apps because we've actually lost all those phone apps.
Yeah.
Like, now there's actually even less. It's actually worse now than it was.
You lose out on all the Silverlight apps that Windows Phone had because Windows Core OS doesn't support Silverlight apps. Why would it? Many of the big players pulled out of building Windows 10 mobile apps specifically. Like the Facebook apps are abysmal, Instagram apps.
And WhatsApp is disappearing now.
WhatsApp's disappeared. That was a Silverlight app, right? So that wouldn't even be running on Windows 10X anyway. There's a lot of apps that just wouldn't be there. It just doesn't make sense to do it. And now other people have said to me, all right, so what about making Android apps compatible with Windows 10X, like an emulation layer on top of it? And this is something Microsoft was definitely considering, and I believe even started work on. They'd done a similar thing with Project Astoria back in 2014, 2015. But the same problems arise when it comes to emulation on Windows. It's that Google will not allow Microsoft a Play Store license doing it this way. So you will have a Windows 10X device and it will have an emulation layer for Android apps. But there's no real way to get those Android apps. The Google Play Store isn't officially supported. Users can sideload it if they want to, probably. But most normal users wouldn't do that. They wouldn't even know how to do that. And Google wouldn't certify the device. So things like Google Pay wouldn't work on the device. Many of the Google apps wouldn't work on that device. Many just Android apps in general wouldn't work on that device because many Android apps tap into Google APIs specifically, which are part of the Play Store services, and they are required for those normal apps to run. So if Windows 10X launched with Android emulation on the Surface Duo, a lot of apps from Android wouldn't actually run in the first place, and there wouldn't be any sort of clear way to get those apps on the device in the first place. So it's a dead end. It's a genuinely dead end for Microsoft to build Android emulation into Windows 10X to solve the app gap that the Surface Duo would have had it been a Windows 10X device. It's just, there's no winning for Microsoft by making it a Windows 10X device. It doesn't encourage developers to build UWP apps, because if that were the case, when Windows Phone was around, the millions of Windows Phone devices would have convinced developers to do that. Surface Duo is going to sell 100,000 units, maybe 200,000 units if we're being generous. This is not a
mainstream
market
product.
Yeah, it's not a mass market device. A lot of people have been saying this to me, like, why is Microsoft getting into the smartphone market? There's no way they're going to be able to compete with the iPhone and Samsung. And you're 100% right. Microsoft doesn't want to compete with the iPhone and Samsung. You are not going to see Microsoft taking this device and going, this is going to replace your iPhone with this. No, that's absolutely not. This is a device that Microsoft has built for Surface fans, for Microsoft ecosystem users. It's a niche device. This isn't a device that Microsoft is expecting to take the smartphone market by storm. And that's a good thing, I think, because it doesn't put pressure on that device to do well. It can sell only a few 100,000 units, but it has a thriving ecosystem because it runs Android. So the users who do buy it aren't burned by the fact that there's no developer support for it and then Microsoft eventually giving it up. Microsoft can sell a few 100,000 of these and still, happily support it because it's supporting Android. And Microsoft apps on Android run on more than just the Surface Duo. There's incentive to continue supporting what runs on the Surface Duo because it's not just the Surface Duo that runs it. And that's why at the end of the day, it runs Android because the ecosystem and the reasoning of it just makes sense to run it compared to Windows, unfortunately.
We also should point out there are rumors floating around that the next targets for UWP development may be actually iOS and Android, which is that's kind of interesting and wouldn't be surprising at all. I've been saying it for years. This was told to me years ago that when Microsoft talks about bridges, we always think of like how to get apps onto Windows, and that's true. That's a one-way bridge, but they've always viewed bridges as two-way. So there was this thing that came out this week. It was a repository that was I forgot, was it WinJava UWP thing, and it was a projection. And the speculation is this may be a way to get UWP apps, or at least part of UWP, because that's also how we got to talk about UWP. There's technologies within it onto Android. Now, that doesn't mean like you're going to take all the apps on the store, the Microsoft Store, and put them onto Android. What it's actually a story for is developers who are making their apps can now mix and match with UWP and put them in both places at the same time. There would still need to be some tweaking, obviously, here and there, but that's obviously where Microsoft is going. This is what we think. Nadella talked about in an interview with Wired, saying platforms don't really matter, because they see this as app development. They want devs to basically have to do the least amount of work to get their apps on the most amount of devices. So devs don't need to make that choice out there. And that would benefit Microsoft, but it also benefits developers who are looking to streamline costs, which is a big deal. And Microsoft also feels like they can contribute here because they always talk about the Microsoft Graph and plugging into these things, AI and their machine learning tools, and they have these cognitive services that developers can leverage for, say, camera recognition and face recognition, text to speech, all this kind of stuff. And so if Microsoft has all these tools, and now their goal is to make it easy for developers to adopt those tools. And one way you do that is through sharing of UWP technology with other platforms. And that may be the route we see now. There's a lot of speculation around that kind of stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if Microsoft does end up targeting UWP parts of or some of its technology towards Android and iOS. That story, though, I think would definitely be talked about at Build later in 2020 in the springtime. Yeah. And so it'll be really interesting to see that. But that seems to be the path that Microsoft is going down, in which case we've joked around that the universal Windows platform will actually take on a much bigger meaning, where they're trying to make something closer to, I guess, Electron, which they actually own now too, which works cross-platform. So you can kind of think of it as that in that way. Fingers crossed. But in that sense, you look at Surface Duo and Neo from them. Yeah, technically different platforms, but they're going to see it as a way to get their, services and apps on both of them at the same time and really kind of optimize that. Someone brought up some criticism regarding iOS, and it's like, well, is Microsoft now dropping the ball in iOS development? And I said, no. In fact, internally, we've been told that when Microsoft makes new apps, they target iOS first because it's a singular platform that's actually easier to develop on than Android, which has multiple targets and different software. But at the same time, they're limited on what they can do on iOS by simply just making apps. Like there's no launcher they can make for iOS, and your phone doesn't work very well because Apple restricts access to what can be done. Microsoft said they would try to talk to Microsoft about opening that up, but obviously it hasn't happened. In fact, your phone now is completely useless for iOS devices. And even Dell's Mobile Connect, is kind of a pain with iOS. You need to keep your phone unlocked and on in order for it to do anything. You don't even get screen mirroring, just some notification support.
Yeah. I think this is, it's a silly topic to have to talk about, really, because I think it's obvious that, the reason why they chose different operating systems. And it doesn't, to 99% of people, it doesn't matter as long as whichever OS is running on whichever device is the right OS for that form factor. Yes, they're both dual screens, but at a fundamental level, they're different form factors. One's a PC and one's a phone. If the PC is running Windows, people will be satisfied with this product. If the phone's running Android, people will be satisfied with this product. And if the UX is similar across both, it won't matter to the user. And Microsoft is working very hard at making its version of Android on the Surface Duo match the UX on Windows 10 X. Yes, it'll be obviously smaller and be different where it makes sense, but on the surface, pun intended, these will look similar across UXs, across software experiences and whatnot, and that's by design because this is Surface. It's a part of one ecosystem, and just because they're running different operating systems, to most people who will be buying these products, that doesn't matter. As long as the devices and the operating systems talk to each other and can sync data across devices and do things like Project Rome and whatnot, then there's no issue. They talk to each other. The Android device might as well be a Windows device. You wouldn't know.
Yeah. So I should also just finally, I'll just say that this debate is really just internal to the Windows Phone community. If you just go out, watch Unbox Therapy and like all the major YouTube channels and their reactions to Surface Duo and even Neo, none of them are having this discussion because it's just prima facie, like it's just obvious why. Like no one's going like, why they do that? Everybody knows this. So it's only within the Windows Phone community that there's this sort of like, it's going to fail and it's terrible and all this. But everybody else, all the mainstream tech channels are like, wow, that's really interesting. That's surprising us. They're showing us like what looks like something out of the future. And I think that's always important. So if you don't believe me, just go watch the YouTube channels, the mainstream ones, and see what they're saying about these devices and how they're reacting to it. Because at the end of the day, it's their opinion that's actually going to be what most people see. And I can tell you right now, if like Engadget, The Verge, Unbox Therapy, you got the Surface Duo running Windows 10X, and they had to compare it to the Android version, they're going to trash that 10X version. And that's all the headlines are going to be. Yeah. And all the headlines are going to be like, why would you buy that thing for what we're expecting maybe $1,500 when you can buy this thing, which will actually replace your phone? It's the only device you need to carry. It makes no sense. Why did Microsoft make this? It's dumb. No one should buy it. And that headline will be repeated all over social media, and Microsoft's got to sit there and be like, hey, we did it for, like, there's a guy on Windows Central in the comments said that we would be dumb if we didn't do this, so we made it for him. Like, that's not a justification. So time for people to kind of get out of their bubbles here. I wish it was different. Maybe it'll be different down the road, but it is what it is, as they like to say.
Unfortunately.
All right, let's talk about, I'll let you take the mic here. What's the plan for Windows 10X? Is this just foldables or?
Yeah, right. So when Microsoft announced Windows 10X last week, and when they briefed us on it before the event, when they were talking to us about it, they're like, yeah, so it's a platform for foldables, and that stuck with me. Like, oh, hang on a minute. So, and I was like, so wait, so is this exclusive to foldables, or will this becoming, to traditional form factors as well? And they were very adamant. No, this is a platform that will be launching on foldables. And that was very interesting to me because that is not what I've been hearing internally. I've been following the development of Windows 10X, which was once codenamed Santorini, which was once codenamed LightOS. There's been many names for it. This was the Windows Lite stuff we've been following since late last year, and I've been following it quite closely. I've seen lots of documentation on it internally. I've seen, goals outlined, plans, schedules, all this good stuff for the operating system. And there, at no point was this an operating system that was for foldables only. Yes, foldables was a big part of it, but there was way more to it than that. So when they announced Windows 10X last week as a foldables only version of Windows 10, that was curious to me. So I've sort of dug around with sources just to triple check everything that I assumed was happening with Windows 10X. And no, it is still happening. So the plan with Windows 10X is it will launch at the end of next year for foldables first. And that's because Microsoft doesn't want to mix messages around Windows 7 users upgrading to Windows 10. Windows 10X is a superior version of Windows 10 in every regard, from the core all the way up to the UX, and security. There's many areas where it's just better than Windows 10 today. But the problem with Windows 10X is that it's so it's very different at its core that you cannot just upgrade to it. The two platforms, Windows 10 and Windows 10X, are incompatible. So you can't do an in-place upgrade from Windows 10 Pro to Windows 10X. So to get Windows 10X, you have to buy a new device. And a lot of people don't want to buy a new device. In the PC space, you buy a new laptop or a new PC, and you keep that PC for 6, 7, maybe even a decade. You keep it for as long as you can. So Windows 7 users who need to upgrade to Windows 10 are probably around about the time where they're going to buy a new PC anyway. But if they're not, they can just upgrade to Windows 10, and that's that. Throwing Windows 10X into the mix and advertising it as the new version of Windows 10 will confuse that messaging quite a bit. So if you announce it just for foldables now, that gives it a small market. People don't need to really pay attention to it for those running normal PCs and whatnot. But the plan is for Windows 10X to become the new air quotes, default version of Windows 10. This is the version of Windows 10 Microsoft wants most people to be using, and they're not going to achieve that by limiting it to foldables specifically. So I don't know the scheduling around when this will happen, but the plan is after 2020, once foldables take launch and whatnot, Microsoft will slowly start introducing Windows 10X on traditional form factors, including laptops, tablets, and two-in-ones. They will make it available to OEMs to preload onto new devices, so Dell or HP or Asus or whoever in the future, in the year 2021 or 2022, will be able to build a Dell XPS 13 or a HP Spectre of sorts and put Windows 10X on it, on a single-screened traditional clamshell laptop. And it will be the same version of Windows 10X. It won't be like since it's Windows Core OS, a lot of people have been saying to me, so are you sure it's going to be, Windows 10X, or will it be a new configuration of Windows Core OS? As far as I'm aware, it's still Windows 10X, because the shell on top of Windows 10X is an adaptive shell. The Santorini, which is the code name for the shell, has two sort of modes. It has a foldables mode, which is what we've seen so far, and it also has a more traditional desktop type mode, which makes the taskbar more familiar. It puts things back where you kind of expect them to be on Windows 10. So the start menu can be in the corner. It can also be centered still if you prefer that on the laptop, but you can move it into the corner. The Action Center has a new UI, but it's still sort of the same sort of Action Center, Control Center we know and love. And apps running Windows. If you didn't notice in the Windows Next demo last week, every app that the person was launching on stage ran in a full screen mode, because it's sort of, the foldables mode is more or less tablet mode. So Windows 10X does have a desktop mode, and it will be coming to traditional laptops and tablets in the future. And the goal is to make this version of Windows the version of Windows most people want to use. Windows 10 today, Windows 10 Pro, Windows 10 Home, etc., isn't going away, and it probably never will go away. 900 million people are running it today, and that's going to take a long time for people to move off that and buy Windows 10X devices. This is a slow burn for Microsoft. 5-10 years easily. So this isn't like, it hasn't taken off in a year, I'll kill it. That's definitely not going to happen with Windows 10X. But Windows 10 itself will sort of slowly but surely turn into the option for power users, for professionals, and for gamers who need that extra layer of complexity to the operating system, being able to access things like the Windows file system and program files for the registry, etc., etc. Windows 10X devices can't do that. The user is locked to its own sort of partition and is unable to access system files, program files, the registry, and whatnot, because it's much more secure, and it's taking a few pages from iOS in that matter, in that the user shouldn't need to access those kind of things. So that's the sort of primary goal for Windows 10X so far. It's going to become the new version of the main version of Windows across the next decade. And I know that sounds like a joke. Oh, the next decade? Are you kidding me? But yeah, I mean, this isn't going to be like a overnight thing. Microsoft won't be pushing Windows 10X as an update to existing Windows 10 users, because they can't. So they do genuinely have to rely on people buying new devices. And like I said, that can take 6 or 7 years for lots of people. People like me and Dan, maybe 2 or 3 years. But generally, the general public don't really think about updating their laptops all that often. So that's why it's going to be a slow burn. It's very similar to Chrome OS. If you want to use Chrome OS today, you have to buy a Chrome OS device. You can't just install it on your current device. And that's going to be the same with Windows 10X.
Yeah, I do imagine maybe in 2021 we'll start to see new hardware launch with Windows 10X for like laptops as well as the foldable story. The way they'll do it, of course, is by then laptops will be getting thinner anyway, so that's not like a huge surprise. But 10X, because the Win32 is now a subsystem, meaning it's not directly have piping to the main core of the operating system. It operates as a container, which means when it's not needed, it basically just disappears. So it frees up system resources, including RAM, CPU, which also affects battery life. And so this allows Microsoft to basically make, this is where the term Windows Lite kind of probably originated from, a lighter version of the operating system, which means, of course, you can get better battery life. Like when you look at something like the Surface Neo, it's really a thin device. Like you don't appreciate it from the images. You're just focusing on sort of the dual screen nature of it. But having seen it and held it in person, it's a very thin device. And so I think one of the reasons why they get it that thin, besides the fact it's using a new Intel processor that's coming out in later in 2020, which also plays into the story, by the way, of why it's not coming out till late 2020. That CPU is not expected to be out until around that time. So what they'll do is they'll create laptops that are going to be like super thin, no bezels, and they're going to look even sleeker than what we have now. And I think that'll be a way to sort of spin, this new version. That said, you showed me today what this looks like on the laptop or the desktop even, and it's pretty hot looking. Like it's the only way I can describe it is it looks like what we've already saw with the foldables, but it's just heavily fluent design. Everything's acrylic and see-through with bright icons. Very clean and minimalist, though. It doesn't have a lot of clutter that traditional Windows 10 Pro has. This is one of the benefits of Windows 10 X on the Surface Neo is it just has fewer stuff going on there. It's no different than how, although I'd argue iPad OS has definitely increased in complexity over the years, but still compared to say Mac OS. Like you can always ask, like, why did Apple just put Mac OS on the iPad? It's like, well, they could have. Would have been as good. It's so much stuff on the desktop. And you look at like iPad OS, it's a much simplified system. It doesn't have, shoot, it didn't even have a file system, right? Until recently. But and this is the benefit that you're going to have with the 10X series is it's just sort of declutterizing and making a very clean, minimalist, UWP focused operating system that still can run Win32 stuff when it needs it. And even then, that whole system, they could actually not put that in there. They could make, a foldable phone device in the future. It doesn't even have the Win32 system in there and be lighter, but they'd have to put telephony back in. I mean, the important thing with Windows Core OS 10X, what we're calling, is it gives Microsoft flexibility in the future. In other words, in a couple of years from now, existing form factors, dual screen form factors, probably triple screen form factors. Yeah, I guarantee, I'm going to say it right now here, 2019. So I'll make a triple screen device. Why not, right? It's like, the door's open, right? Innovation's going to happen. Doesn't mean it's going to be awesome, but you saw it on Westworld. They have a tri-screen device on that. But this OS will allow them to go to those devices, whereas Windows 10 can't do that. It's just too big. It's too bloated to go into that kind of hardware. But this will allow them to be like, oh, so, hey, we're experimenting this new kind of thing that's never been done before. Cool. We can now put Windows Core OS on there because they can pull out the things that don't matter. Win32 matters in some scenarios, doesn't matter in other scenarios, So it's a cool thing, but this is just the start of the future. And for everybody else who hates all this idea and just wants a giant gaming desktop like what I'm using here, the HP Omen, hey, you got Windows 10 Pro. That's going to be around forever. So,
and I'm pretty sure some of the UX elements from Windows 10X will sort of make their way to Windows 10 over time as well. So
I want that new start menu.
You'll have the clean UX on top of the legacy core, which is fine, I think, for most people. Now, I do want to also talk about briefly the differences between Windows Core product editions, like the different versions of Windows Core OS, because a lot of people, when they were reading my articles, seem to get confused about this, about how I was calling Windows 10X a version of Windows Core OS for not only foldables but for laptops and tablets as well. And a lot of people said, "Are you sure this won't just be a different version of Windows Core OS that isn't Windows 10X?" And the answer is no. It will be Windows 10X will be the same across tablets, laptops, and foldables because the UX doesn't change all that. The feature set and the UX doesn't change all that much between the foldables and the desktop. All it does is it moves a few elements about. So the shell is still the same. It's still the Santorini shell. But when a device form factor is radically different, like the Surface Hub 2X, for example, that's when you get the new Windows Core products. So I'm going to sort of mention 3 Windows Core editions here because these are the 3 that have sort of been mostly talked about. There are more, I believe, for like things like IoT and whatnot and server. But the 3 that I want to mention here is Windows Core OS for HoloLens 2, Windows Core OS for Surface Hub 2X, and Windows Core OS for consumer devices, laptop, tablets, and foldables. Those are the 3 that are sort of the frontier of Windows Core OS. And the reason those are considered different product SKUs is because they have different components and different feature sets plugged in on the device type. So HoloLens 2, for example, doesn't have the Win32 emulation layer because it doesn't need it. It might have it at some point in the future when that works on ARM, but for now it doesn't have it. It also has an entirely different shell codenamed Oasis. It's the Oasis shell. Wouldn't make sense on a laptop or the Surface Hub, for example. So that shell is a specific configuration of C shell for HoloLens 2, which that product version of Windows Core is called Windows Holographic. Then you've got the Service Hub 2X, which is another entirely different form factor, which has another entire different UX. So that the name of that shell is Aruba, and that has elements moved around. It's actually quite a little bit similar to Windows 10X's shell in the sense that the start button is centered and whatnot, but it is for the most part quite different. It has things like a shared desktop, for example, but since the Service Hub 2X is communal, you don't log into the device when you walk up to it. You sort of just start interacting with it, and if you need to grab your own files, you log in with your fingerprint, and that just sort of taps into your workspace but doesn't log you into a full account. And that's very specific to the Service Hub 2X. So that kind of thing isn't needed on Windows 10X, for example. And then you've got Windows 10X, which is more or less, the general consumer use. It's a platform for, using apps and getting things done on a personal computer of sorts. And as such, that doesn't need to be 3 different versions of Windows Core OS across laptops, tablets, and foldables. It's one edition of Windows Core that has an adaptable shell that moves things around depending on the form factor. The feature set should be the same under the UI layer and whatnot. So they should all have Win32 support, for example. And that's why these are the Windows 10X stuff is one product, and then the others are separate products. And you'll see that across server as well. Like server has its own needs and wants for whatever it's running on, and Windows 10 for IoT also has specific things. Like, for example, some versions of IoT don't even need a UI, so you take that component right out the top. There you go. So hopefully that clears up some confusion around how Windows Core OS works and how it's working with Windows 10X. It probably won't, but listen, it doesn't matter. To you, it doesn't matter. Windows 10X will be a platform that slowly but surely comes to more and more devices over time, and I think that's very exciting.
Yeah, no, it's all interesting stuff. So it's the future for Microsoft, but a lot of options. That's what, like I said, that's what it comes down to. It gives Microsoft options, it gives users options, and they'll be able to kind of create stuff. You could almost think of it as the new version of Windows CE. Windows CE going way, way back was the foundation of Pocket PC and the Dell Axum and all those kind of devices. And eventually became the foundation of Windows Phone 7. But CE was very old and didn't have the core. It had a different kernel than what Windows was. So it was a very different. It looked very much like Windows, but internally it was completely different, and app development was completely different. Anyone knows cab files and how they differ from executables will know this. But Windows CE served this role as what was cool about Windows CE is it ran everything from pocket PCs to eventually phones to hand scanners to also kiosks, and they were allowed to put it everywhere. That's why it lasted for so long. And then they can kind of give it a UI that almost made it look like Windows to give you that familiarity. The same concept is kind of similar here, except it's just way newer, and the way they broke apart the OS into various, compartments allows them way more flexibility to update and fix things and change the UI without, right now Windows 10 is so, that's why, you guys complain about the shell taking so long to upgrade with Fluent, but the shell has parts going back 20 years to it. It's really hard to undo all that. So I'm very excited about it. From what you and I have seen of 10X, both for foldables and laptop, desktop, I think it looks fantastic. I kind of can't wait to get it. My prediction, I'm going to throw it out there right now, nothing to base this on, but my hunch is maybe October 2020, Microsoft shows off Surface Go 2, maybe running a Snapdragon 7CX, which may be announced in December this year. And then and maybe that could be one of the first Windows Lite devices or Windows Core X, Windows 10X devices. That's not a dual screen. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think we all agree that conceptually both those things make sense for a Surface Go.
Yeah, 100%. Like when I was first learning about Windows Lite, I went to the Surface Go straight away, and I actually know for a fact that the Surface Go is one of the popular devices employees internally use to test Windows 10X, because obviously not every employee has access to a foldable prototype of any kind. And sure, you can use it in simulators and whatnot, but it's not really like using it in the real thing. So you can actually, if you're an employee, you can flash Windows 10X onto the Surface Pro 4, 5, and 6, and the Surface Go, and I believe the Surface Book And as probably the Surface laptop. I mean, I've not actually heard if it works on the Surface laptop, but I would assume it can. Now, I don't know if Microsoft will ever make this available to the public. My guess is no, because like I said, you can't upgrade directly from Windows 10 to Windows 10 X, but you can blow away your current system and just flash Windows 10 X onto the device, but you need a special tool for it and whatnot, because Windows 10 X isn't delivered in the same way as Windows 10 is, in the sense that Windows 10 is an ISO. You can just, download an ISO, load those files onto a USB and boot from the USB. Windows 10 X doesn't work like that. It's an FFU file, so you'll have to use a special tool to flash that image onto the device. And speaking of image, it's funny you mentioned like Windows CE, which sort of birthed Windows, Pocket PC and whatnot. Windows Core OS grew out of an attempt to revitalize Windows 10 Mobile. If you look at the OS image, and if you're familiar with how Windows 10 Mobile sort of laid out as an OS image as well, Windows Core OS products, including Windows 10 X, lay out very, very similarly to Windows 10 Mobile. And that's not a coincidence. It's core, like it grew out of like trying to redo Windows 10 Mobile to make it better, make it more universal. So in that essence, Windows Mobile succeeded. It kind of like it's got the ball rolling, and then Microsoft were like, right, we need to take this to the next level. We'll do Windows Core OS and sort of build upon it, and that's what's happened here. And so Windows 10 X is technically based on a mobile OS, although they've obviously made it way more than that now. But that's where it started with Andromeda OS, which was the version of Windows that was going to run on the Surface Duo originally. That's where this ball got rolling. It started off as a version of Windows for a dual screen phone, and then they decided that there's no that platform. So let's keep the Windows core stuff that we've been working on for other device form factors. Let's move the Andromeda device to Android, and we'll go from there. And I think that's the right choice.
Yep, and I should also point out we don't know the status of Continuum / what Android can do too when you plug it into a display out and all that kind of stuff. My guess is there probably is something there. Yeah. Microsoft's not ready to talk about it. But listen, there's way more we don't know about these devices than we do know at this point, and obviously it's very early days. Some of this is going to be dependent on hardware vendors, what they can source, what they can actually get away with. That includes the camera. All this will be coming out over the next few months through fall of 2020. So stay tuned for that. I've said it before, though, the camera, listen, I think the camera will probably be pretty good. Maybe it could even be OnePlus quality. Even that might be difficult, but this will never beat Samsung and Apple and Huawei. I think that's probably out of the question, but you're not going to buy this to necessarily do it. It's for the other features. But that's just the reality of it. I'd love to be surprised. The Surface team does do good with cameras. I've said, and I'll keep saying this, they still make the best webcam on any mobile device in terms of for laptops and stuff like that. Other companies are getting close, but the Surface cameras are still just the best. They can definitely do optics when they need to, but I mean, that phone space right now for cameras is that's all they are now, is just high-end cameras. Yeah. So
I have a feeling the Duo will not be able to compete. And I don't think Microsoft is.
Panos has said in an interview that it won't.
Yeah, it takes pictures, but it's not going to be it's not going to blow anything out of the water, I don't think.
Yeah. But a lot can be done with software these days, so
yeah.
Well, I'll have to wait and see, but let's keep expectations in check.
Right.
And finally, let's round this out with the Surface Watch. I know a lot of you guys are like, wait, there's a Surface Watch? And no.
This is just Daniel's pipe dream. Just so
this is my pipe dream. But listen, it's based on a lot of logic here. Let's turn to, first of all, Microsoft's own vision. Was it Productivity Future Visions video from 2015? They also had a video from 2011 called Future Visions. And they're on YouTube. Just search for those terms. It's in the article that I wrote for this. These were officially sanctioned Microsoft videos that were made in conjunction with the various teams working on hardware and software. And I think they were basically given the question of where do you see your stuff in 10 years? 5 to 10 years is the usual limit. And I think each team basically gave back their proposals, and then they made these videos. And they're kind of cool because it's someday in the future. But go back and watch, especially the Productivity Visions one from 2015, but also the other one from 2011, because you will see in those videos the Surface Dial. You're going to start to see the Surface Hub. You'll see aspects of Surface Pro. You'll see the earbuds, 100% the earbuds there's a woman walking around who has headphones in and they're circles in her ear. They look a little bit slightly different, but it's basically the same concept. They're touch sensitive. And so when you go back to those videos, you'll see just device, folding screen devices. And obviously the stuff in there is way more polished. They also had a phone that was a dual screen phone, but one half would snap off. Now, it's way more polished in those videos than what we're getting in reality. So in that sense, it's always a little disappointing, but that's always the case. But conceptually, like you'll see like a thing that looks like very much like the Surface Dial in there. It's funny because you go watch those videos, you're like, oh, this is actually not just them like taking a hit from the Vong and being like, what if? And and then they just give us something like a boring laptop. These are actually like roadmaps to what Microsoft is at least actively thinking about in terms of hardware and software for the future. And you'll see a concept we've talked about before too, ambient displays and different types of cloud computing. And I forgot what the other word I was going to say, what they often use in this, but this concept of like you just have like displays and the OS is just kind of seamless on there and you can transfer data between the two. We've seen this before with the original Surface Hub. You put the phone down on there and it would transfer your photos and you just flick them on and all this kind of stuff. Now, something that we don't have, but just go watch these videos. They're really cool. And in that video, you'll see a woman, she has like a bracelet on and then she kind of like moves her hand, they kind of snap together. And basically the whole bracelet, which is a couple inches wide, is just basically a wraparound display. And it shows like an upcoming meeting and she can swipe through and all this kind of stuff. And it's a neat idea. And actually it's kind of funny because if you would watch that, 2-3 years ago, you're like, oh, come on, foldable and wraparound displays, impossible. Meanwhile, it was just, I forgot who announced it. Was Xiaomi? Yeah, I think it was Xiaomi. Just showed off their new phone, which actually does go on sale. I think it's $2,500. They fully admit it's a concept phone. They don't expect it to be mainstream, but they're kind of putting it out there because I love when companies do this because they just want to put it out there and show what they do. But this phone is, if you take the Mate X, the foldable screen, and just make that screen just wrap around the entire phone and there's no folding. So the whole phone it only has top and bottom bezels. Everything else is a display, including the entire back of the phone, which is mind blowing. But they're going to ship this thing, right? So this idea of like screens that wrap around objects is here. It's coming, right? That makes that one. I'm not saying that's what they're going to do. I'm just saying conceptually that stuff is now becoming reality. My other argument is when you look at the Surface Duo, the dual screen Android phone, it folds up. Now the display is reverse fold, which is cool. So you could like fold it one way and just leave it in your pocket like that. But now you have the opportunity to scratch two displays instead of one in your pocket. So I think most people probably fold it up the other way when it's closed, right? But that raises the problem, which is like, so every time the phone vibrates in your pocket or the little chime goes off, you're going to have to pull this thing out and open it up, look at the display and be like, okay, I don't care, and put that back in your pocket. I'm not saying like the workload there is tremendous, but if you do that like 20, 30 times a day, it could be annoying. And we've had multiple solutions for this. Like, for instance, let me show you my, this is a very familiar concept to anyone who's had a Lumia, the always on screen display, which Lumia has pioneered. And now this is my Huawei device has it. And what's cool about always on displays is I can just look at that. I can get my time. I can see icons for important messages or missed calls or battery, and I don't have to turn on the device. The other solution to that, of course, is a wearable, whether it's like a Fitbit like I'm wearing or an Apple Watch, which I'm also wearing. You can just look at your wrist as a notification comes in. A phone call. And sometimes you can even take the phone call. Or you can get an email message and be like, vibrate. Oh, okay, I don't really care. I don't like to turn my phone on. Or that's urgent. Let me pull out my phone and take the time to respond. So we all conceptually know this. And when it comes to the Duo, I feel like this problem of notification management is going to be compounded by the fact of its design, which is not conducive to alerts. Now, we've seen patents before where Microsoft puts a little display on the hinge, and you can kind of pull it out and kind of look at the hamburger hinge and see a little display that'll probably go across. And that's cool. I'm not sure that's a permanent solution, but it would help. But this is why I feel like when you take those limitations, and what Microsoft is clearly thinking about wearables, and this wearable also had like an NFC thing, so she goes up to a door and unlocks the door, which again, that stuff is real now. People do have dongles and things that go up to doors. Shoot, people are getting NFC chips inserted under their skin now. It's called biohacking, so that you can just go up to doors and unlock with their hand. So this stuff is very familiar. So clearly Microsoft's thinking about that, and they have now a device that I think would more than require such a solution, especially when compared to current smartphones. So how are they not going to come out with a wearable? We should also point out they did a Microsoft Band. Now, that wasn't the Surface team. That was a separate group. But when you look at the technology behind Surface Band, it was so ahead of its time. The thing has a UV sensor. I mean, no one's done a UV sensor in a wearable sense. And it had a lot of cool stuff going on. The issue with Band was Microsoft's not very good at scaling hardware up to releasing it in certain markets. It had a high failure rate, and anyone who's owned these things, I've had a friend that went through 3 or 4 of them because they kept tearing, and the cost of them were very expensive, as you reported on, because the curved display was made by Samsung, as it was OLED, and that cost of that display was super expensive compared to the cost of the device, meaning that Microsoft actually wasn't even making much money on these things. But clearly, the company has the know-how to make that happen. They've dismantled Microsoft Health, but at the same time, if they want to do some health stuff again, they have all that tech they're sitting on. They even have the tech for a tiny workable keyboard that you could, I still blows my mind. You were able to type on the Microsoft Band and it worked well. So I feel like when we take all those 3 pieces, I can't see how they're not going to do a wearable. I could almost see them in spring of 2020 or even in the fall, like in the spring, tease it, be like, oh, one more thing. And he pulls up his sleeve and he shows this thing off. Can't you just see that happening? And if he does want to, and that would also, if they did it in the spring, I like, because they don't have to do marketing images, means it would be a true surprise. We wouldn't get leaks. Or they could also do it in the fall, in which case we'll definitely find out the night before, because Microsoft are idiots and puts all their stuff on servers so that people can hack it off. But still, he could do one more thing and pull it off. Like, by the way, when you get your Surface Duo, you can also get this bad boy. And it'll be, and then this is where we can get into, well, how does it differ from, say, Google Wear or an Apple Watch? And I don't know. This is where Microsoft's creativity comes in. But if you look at that video, at least in one case, they envision a wearable, wrap around display. By the way, that bracelet would come off and it was like a slap bracelet. It would reverse expand into like a full screen device that you could operate. I don't know. Maybe they'll do something like that. But the reason they could definitely just make a Google Wear device, but Google Wear is kind of terrible. I have a Fossil 5 and it's beautiful hardware, but Google doesn't, this is the consensus I got from talking to people who cover Android. Google doesn't seem that serious with Google Wear. There's no real updates to it. They haven't really done any innovation around it. Apple's kind of running away with that high-end wearable market, and Fitbit is still kind of the de facto, low to mid-range fitness market. So that doesn't make sense. And I've said before, we've talked about on this podcast, that a wearable never made sense for Microsoft to do. As much as I would love to Surface team to do it, because they didn't have a phone to go with it to like really optimize and share that experience. And between me saying that and today, they announced a phone that runs Android. So like I and we know about Windows Core Technologies. They could put possibly parts of this on there. They're clearly working with Qualcomm and AMD to customize chips, because this is the other piece we have to consider, that the Qualcomm chips kind of aren't very good right now for wearables either, which is again why Apple's killing it with their Bionic processors. But clearly Microsoft's working with these silicon guys pretty closely. So could they be working on a custom chip? I would have said 2 years ago, seems unlikely. Now, all we've seen from them, when you look at HoloLens 2, when you look at the Surface Pro X, when you look at the Surface Laptop 3 15-inch, yeah, these guys are working on custom silicon, or at least customized silicon, I should say. So even there, there's a possibility. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I would love to see a new wearable from Microsoft. It just, I come back to what would it run? Because yes, technically Windows Core S probably could. But there's no app platform for Windows for a
but doesn't need
2 inches.
but doesn't need an app platform.
No, right. Well, in that case, it doesn't need Windows, right? They could just do go the firmware route like they did with the Microsoft Band, which, to be honest, I actually didn't mind. I actually really liked the firmware that ran on the Microsoft Band. I thought it was very beautiful and fluid and fast. I don't remember complaining about it being slow ever. They could just go the firmware route and just do it that way, which I think makes more sense for a wearable, really, because it's much more lightweight and whatnot, better battery life as a result. But I want to come back to the issue that people, because I've seen actually quite a few people have this issue with the Surface Duo being that when it's in your pocket, the screens are closed. So now you've got to pull it out and then you've got to open the device before you can see what's going on. I never once looked at that and went, oh, well, how cumbersome. Like that's not an issue to me. Like I don't mind though, because I've got to get it out of my pocket anyway. What's just one more just to open the screen to see what it is? That's not an issue to me personally. And
it's an issue. It's the only reason why notification support on wearables is one of the first things people always ask, because they don't want too many notifications. They definitely want control over those notifications, but they want the ability to just look at their wrist. I'm getting them right now as I'm talking to you, and it's also just it's a social thing. If you're ever in a meeting and your phone goes off or something and you keep pulling it out and opening it up to look at it, the other person's going to think you're a huge a-hole. Sorry.
Well, compared to looking at your watch, isn't that just
but
as
Microsoft
big?
Band, yeah, but Microsoft Band figured that out by wearing it on the inside of your watch. You could actually just look at your wrist internally, and you were able to.
With most Fitbits and stuff, though.
Huh?
Can't you do it with Fitbit as well?
You could if you want to. But Band was actually sort of like
designed.
Encouraged
The UI
to be
was designed. Yeah.
You know, because again, they thought about that kind of stuff. So,
in that case, the solution is to just, like you said, just wear the screens on the outside. You may scratch them, but then again, your phone's going in out your pocket anyway. A normal phone screen will get scratched. It's just that's the way it is. Like there is a way. That's why the dual screen system's in place, is so you can have it so the screens are on the outside. That's kind of one of the primary reasons they went for the dual screen.
I just don't know if anyone wants to use the back of the phone as a screen and put it down on a table. That would freak me out. I'd be like, I don't care if it's Gorilla Glass 19.
Glass is glass.
I used to tick me off. Mark would sometimes shoot videos of my phones, and they'd be laying face down on the table, and he would just push them around to get the shot, and he would slide them around like pucks. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you can't just slide that stuff around. I mean, that's how you get all those micro abrasions. Now, I think I'm right about this. I don't know if they're actually going to do anything, obviously, and that's sort of the issue.
Yeah, we've heard no whispers. Like, we even had whispers of the Android phone. We have no whispers of this watch.
Not yet, but we didn't hear, about the wearables, the headphones until it was pretty imminent that they were going to be released. And again, I don't think. Where the Microsoft Band kind of failed too was it was definitely trying to compete against, Fitbit and Apple Watch and Google Wear at the time. It was trying to really be mainstream. But this wouldn't have to be like that. Just like Surface Duo doesn't need to be mainstream and sell a lot. Like this would be a high-end, companion device to that you'd presumably buy. Like for instance, on the Duo, the pen is not included. You have to buy that. On the Neo, and this would presumably work with the Neo too, the keyboard and pen are separate purchases there. So like Microsoft's not and I forgot I left out the third thing, which is the earbuds. Like the earbuds play a part in this. Like everybody's figured this one out too, including Apple. So like you have the AirPods, you have the iPhone, you have the Apple Watch. Now you can actually leave the phone in your pocket, take a call on your watch with the earbuds, and everything just works, right? And this is cutting to this idea that is just accepted. Everybody knows where we're going, which is this full wearable tech. Like eventually Microsoft will have a pair of glasses you just put on that has a pop-up display, just like North, if you haven't heard of them. The Canadian startup makes a wearable glasses that have a pop-up projector, so it displays your notifications. It doesn't have a camera, so it's unlike Google Glass. You just, Fisher reviewed this, Mr. Mobile. You just walk around and you control it. You have a little ring on your finger, and you control the notifications and scrolling on that. Like to me, that was a very Microsoft idea.
Yeah,
and you can go buy that today.
I think something like that is way more likely for Microsoft than a watch, personally, because like a watch is like, even with the phone, like it is a phone, but they're trying to sort of push the phone forward, like the dual screen setup and stuff. Like a wearable, you can't really do much else with the wearable on your wrist. It's like, yeah, it's a screen attached to your wrist, but with AR glasses, that's cool. That's something I think makes more sense for notifications as
it's
well.
not gonna be ready for Duo.
No, of course not. But I don't
But
think...
like I'm saying like they could actually release a wearable for Duo. Like that's actually I think way more plausible. And also there's a fact that not everybody's going to want to wear glasses, and you got to get into like the frames and what works.
contacts.
I think they'll go down. I think they will do that. Obviously, HoloLens kind of proves that, but I feel like that's looking even further down the road. I'm saying for immediately right now, this idea of like Surface earbuds, you have a Duo in your pocket, and then you have like a wearable on your wrist. That just, I mean, Samsung got this, Apple gets this.
You're
like to me, there's just
walking Microsoft advert.
yeah, but that's actually how all this technology is kind of working, where we're going to be wearing multiple. Eventually, the smartphone will kind of get broken down. That's what's happening, right? Into these various components that are just always on you, and it augments your own abilities. The glass thing is, an even further projection of that. But I just can't see if they don't do this. I'd be like, how did you guys not figure this out? Or I'd be really interested because they would obviously have reasons. And I'd be really interested in those reasons. I could be convinced. They could be like, oh, this and this and that, and here's the problem. And like, okay, I guess. But it just seems to me like, how would they not do this? And I can just see it as something that will fly under the radar. You mentioned it yourself. Like, let's be clear, Zach. A lot of our sourcing, your sourcing in particular, comes from the Windows team, right? I imagine. And so, like, but this isn't really running Windows because it is a custom firmware thing. The same with the Surface headphones. It's kind of like how it flies under the radar because it's really an internalized project that not many people would actually need to work on.
Yeah.
So I could see this happening. Whether it does or doesn't, we don't know. Hopefully, we'll start to see leaks in the future. There are plenty of patents that they have on wearables that they are working on, but it would be cool because I don't think I feel like also if they have a Surface Duo and they're like, well, what about wearables? Like, oh, well, this Google Wear. Like, no, that's like, I don't know, like I need a car, and it's just like, go buy this like junky thing. I feel like
Microsoft should just buy Fitbit, and then all of these problems are solved, and they've got it. There it is.
I mean, so let's talk about that quickly, but because a lot of people bring that up. I'm mixed on that because I obviously I love Fitbit. I bought every single one of them.
Right now.
I don't know what the end game there would be for Microsoft.
Well, so you can see notifications on the Duo, obviously.
Yeah, but like, do they continue then making all those Fitbits?
Well, you can't just make a watch just for seeing notifications from the Duo. It would have to have its own ecosystem and like reason for existing outside of just that.
Sure, this is where the creativity comes in. I don't think all they could get. I'd rather see them license health technology from Fitbit.
Yeah.
Because they do it really well. But then again, I would argue that the Microsoft Band did health stuff very well. Its pedometer, its heart rate sensor, its sleep sensor were all actually way ahead of the competition. Not necessarily Fitbit, but it got me to give up my Fitbit for a long time without like being worried about that data. I just love the way it presented things, and it worked very well. So I feel like Microsoft can actually do that. But the problem here is like if they make a Surface wearable, again, it's just a companion device for Duo. They just need to sell it in the same markets as Duo. It'll work, I assume, with other Android devices, probably even iOS too. Right? That's easy enough. But if you bought Fitbit, you just bought like a global company whose job is to globally supply wearables. Or you're going to do what you did with Nokia and gut it. I mean, but Microsoft doesn't want to. That's not the company Microsoft wants to be, and that's what they mean when they say Satya Nadella says we don't want to be a hardware company. Mm-hmm. That's what he means. He doesn't want to be Fitbit. But this Surface wearable, and that was also the problem with Band. Band was trying to kind of be where Fitbit was, but they just do this wearable. It's a much narrower target with less pressure to do that. So. And I just wouldn't want to see Microsoft destroy Fitbit. And I just know that Microsoft wouldn't buy Fitbit and continue it as it is. So I just don't see it happening.
Fair enough. Well, hopefully at the end of next year, we'll have not only a new phone, but a new watch to wear.
Yeah. I'm getting it out there because it makes sense to me. And yeah, we're here next year and we're like, I can't wait to get that Surface wearable. I'm going to be like, yeah, patting myself on the back. Man, I called that. And if I'm wrong, then I'm just going to be like, Microsoft is wrong. They should have made a wearable. Absolutely. And then it's going to be something I'll criticize in the review because they're going to make me buy what? A freaking Google Wear Watch and I have to use that instead. Ugh.
Yeah.
I'll do it. I'll do it. I won't be happy about it. What I want though is I still really do like, I know you like it too, the Apple Watch. But I'll also finally say you mentioned the app thing. I kind of get that. I will say if all the smartwatches, even Apple, the apps are kind of the worst part of them. Like
I agree.
Apps on the Apple Watch aren't that great. I mean, I like the little Spotify player. I like checking my little weather and having those, but those aren't really, those are applets. Let's be clear. These are applets, right? But people, who's downloading a video game to their watch and playing games like that? Like you got to be some kind of sadistic idiot to do those kind of things. And I've already trashed Fitbit's apps. Like those are even worse, and they're not good on Google Wear either. They're terrible. The launcher on there. I feel like that whole app model would actually be the one area where Microsoft does something different because that's not working. It's just not. Everybody wants it for all the other stuff, but not for that. So that's my final take on there. Whew, I ranted quite a lot. Hopefully I convinced you all. We just hit 90 minutes. I think that's enough. Plus, now we got to do questions.
And as always,
comments.
Channel 1 joined us just as we're ending the show. So.
Oh, really? Yes. Thank you, Channel 1. Well, now they get to hear all our questions and comments. Unless you had any last thoughts?
No, I think we wrapped it up quite nicely there.
Sounds good. All right. So we record this every Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on mixer.com/Windows Central. We're also on YouTube if you'd like to catch us there. We do now do questions and answers with the audience. But if you're listening to this recorded, unfortunately, you don't get to hear that. We're sorry. It's a little too weird just to add as a recording because there's lots of weird pauses. But you're always encouraged to join us and ask us away. Otherwise, you just follow me on Twitter at Daniel_Rubino. That's Rubino and Zach at ZACBOWDEN. I'm also under the same name for Instagram, where I do post occasionally stuff I'm reviewing and stuff I'm checking out and random tips and cool things. So make sure you follow that. Always appreciate it. And of course, we'll catch you next week. We are ramping up for our Surface review, so pay attention to Windows Central for that. I can't give you any dates for it, but they go on sale. Was it Pro 7 and Laptop 3s go on sale the 22nd of October. So I imagine we'll probably have reviews around that time as well. So make sure you pay attention to that. Hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions about those that you want me to look at. But I mean, I got this. I know what you guys want. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Take care, everyone.
Cool. So yeah, I actually can't hang around for too long today because we've already gone over time a bit. But yeah, we'll answer a few questions, make them good, because why not?
Google Pixel are great. They're okay phones.
I couldn't care less about.
I will say the 3A. That's pretty great. Just for the price and the value there, I think is actually pretty awesome.
Could you imagine if Surface Duo is $399? I would. Could you imagine?
Loss. Yeah. Flood the market.
When will Surface All Access program be updated with the new Surface products? I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't know either. We'll ask around.
What weight from a current phone device would you say the Surface Neo felt like? I should mean the Duo. Dan's held the Surface Duo. How heavy would you say it is compared to other phones like the iPhone 11?
The Duo? It was not heavy at all.
Not heavy.
It's so thin. It's so thin. I'm telling you, it's a very deceiving device. When you see it in person, you're going to think, wow, that's smaller than I thought it was. When you hold it, it's thinner than you think it is. It's a very ergonomic device. Like, it's cool, man.
Do you think Microsoft will make a translation layer for 64-bit on ARM? I do not believe so. I believe that it's limited to 32-bit. And
I think there's also some patent and licensing thing with 64-bit. I forgot the exact reasoning behind that.
Will the next Xbox be running Windows 10X? No. It will be running a hybrid OS that's a mishmash between Xbox's custom thing, Windows Core OS, and a layer of legacy OS for backwards compatibility. that was a very generalized description of it. But yeah, Xbox OS has always been a weird cluster of different OSs, some proprietary that's only in use on Xbox, and some Windows based. So yeah, it won't be like a pure Windows Core OS thing, but it will definitely have Windows Core OS components.
I don't think the camera will be great regarding the Duo. Didn't HMD, who now makes Nokias, get all the sweet PureView patents? Yes, I believe so. And obviously, today in 2019, all we're talking about is how amazing all the Nokia cameras are and how they're the leader in the market because of those patents. I'm wrong. The Nokia cameras all are very mediocre at best. Goes to show you, just having patents without the large dedicated camera team and engineers behind those algorithms. And I'm talking about Yuha, who is the one that basically made all the PureView tech for the Lumia series, is not there, and how important that stuff is, which is why I'll say again, this stuff is really hard. Unless Microsoft assembled some A-team, both for hardware and algorithms, yeah, putting out a competitive camera in 2020, it's pretty much impossible. I can't see how they can do it.
Here's a good question. How can Microsoft customize Android? Will the Duo just be running essentially Android with a Microsoft launcher, or can they go deeper? They can go way deeper. If they really wanted, they could make Android look and feel like nothing like Android. They could make it not even run Android apps if they really wanted to. Android is open source, so you can get in there and change up anything and everything you want as an OEM. Samsung does it. Samsung changes up a lot of stuff UI-wise, and they've thrown in a whole lot of additional features and whatnot that Android itself usually copy a year later, which is funny. So if you ever want to know what Android is going to do in its next release, just use a Samsung device from last year. It probably has all those features already, because Samsung likes to just throw every feature they can think of at the wall. And Google goes, oh, those features are a cool idea. And then they take it and add it to the main fork of Android. So yeah, Microsoft can and will be customizing Android themselves. I don't think they'll go crazy about things. I think they'll just update the UI here and there to make it a little more Microsoft-y.
They told me that they want you to be able to pick it up and be like, this is an Android device, and be familiar with it. They're not going to like radically change things and slow it down. No live tiles. The launcher is going to be made by the launcher team, but it'll be a different launcher that will work better on dual screens, but it'll be familiar to those of you who run launcher on Android. I imagine you'll see things like OneDrive integrated in the core of the operating system. Will probably be under settings, so that'll be a default.
And your phone.
And your phone too, and stuff like that, where it makes sense, where for sharing and files, and maybe even Skype will be part of the dialer, right? So all that stuff is definitely a possibility, but we can't comment on it right now. Microsoft didn't comment on it, but we'll have to wait and see.
Someone's asking, will the Duo have wireless charging? They haven't confirmed it, but I have it on good authority that it will. So take that as you will. How much?
It does have glass backs, so
right, yeah. How much different is Windows 10 X from Andromeda OS in terms of UX? Quite different. Maybe one day I'll do an article on the original OS for Andromeda, but not today.
Do you really think the Duo will be a success if they can't nail at least LG or OnePlus level camera? First of all, this gets into what is success. I don't. That's an internally set thing that we actually aren't privy to, and each of us have our own concept. Surface has never been about selling millions of devices. Right. Now they don't want them to tank. So they want to sell them. They also don't want high returns, which would be an interesting. That's a measurement too. Do I think it could be? Yeah, I think so, because Zach will flat out tell you right now he gives two craps about the camera.
Yeah, I would buy it if it had no cameras.
Yeah, and I think the selling point to this isn't like, oh, it does photos really well. It's going to be about the other stuff you can do that other phones don't do well. And that'll be a decision that some people will have to make. It'll be one that a lot of people wish they didn't have to make. I do appreciate having a really good camera on my phone. But that said, I'll also say that even the mediocre cameras in 2019 are like pretty good, and most people are actually kind of fine with it. You do see a lot of people in the media just like going over and over the camera differences between the new iPhone 11 and the new Huawei. And it's an interesting nerd discussion in the sense that people talk about engines and cars and how, the cylinders and this one is better than this and the engine. Like, but that's a tiny group of people. And this is, I think, a side effect of the fact that phones are just boring and there's literally nothing else to talk about except pixel peeping on cameras. But if you talk to regular people who are using an iPhone 7 as their main daily device and are okay with the camera, my girlfriend, she went from an iPhone 8 to the iPhone 11. That's a pretty big jump in the camera performance, I can tell you. Have I heard her rave about it? Did she go to me like, "Oh my God, is it?" No,
Yeah.
not once, not a single
Yeah.
time. So like, you got to keep in mind that this camera stuff. I know you guys are that cutting edge of tech. You're the one percenters. You know the f-stop on these lenses. You know about wide and zoom, but you're not the majority. The majority, and I'm not trying to like. There's the reality. I don't think the Microsoft team can physically create a camera in a year or two that's as good. There's also that's not the focus of this device. And so I don't want to get people's hopes up. I'd rather tell you guys it's going to suck, and then it's actually not so bad than the reverse. So let's
Yeah.
just go from there.
Will the Neo have mouse support? Yes, you'll be able to control it with a mouse. Do OEMs need to make devices with Windows 10 X in the same size as the Neo, or could they make something smaller, smiley face with tongue poking out? So I know what you're asking. Can they make a phone-sized device with Windows 10 X? The answer, I believe, is no. I believe the smallest they can go is around 8-ish inches. Maybe they can go smaller, but Windows
Oh,
10 X doesn't.
that's 8 point. What was it? I mean, that's what the Duo is, right?
Yeah, but let's
8.6.
fold it out. Yeah. I do not believe the telephony stack's part of Windows 10 X anyway. So
Yeah.
you can't make a phone with it.
But that said, yeah, as far as we know, I mean, for instance, you've already seen the Lenovo's device. It's a single screen
Yeah.
foldable. That's 13 inches, I believe.
Mhm.
So that's one variant already right there.
You
So
can have bigger ones. You can have smaller ones. Yeah.
yeah, and we will see OEMs compete in different sizes and features.
I'm sure we'll see one the size of the GPD that Dan was holding up earlier, but I do not expect to see any sort of phone-sized device.
But Windows Phone, if they just did this, if you ever hear anyone say if they just stop them, be like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
The,
I
the,
read a
the,
comment earlier that was like, the app gap wasn't the only problem with Windows Phone, and I'm like, yeah, I know. That's just good.
There's that's the thing when people talk about the depth of Windows phones, they really want to just point to this one moment, and it's never like that. There is at least probably 10 different reasons why Windows
His
Phone failed.
justification, though, because I can't remember what we're talking. We're talking about obviously them choosing Windows Phone for the Duo, and his reasoning behind that comment was, well, look, you seem to be fixated on the app gap as being Windows Phone's biggest downfall, but there were more issues with Windows Phone, and I'm like, and your point is, you're kind of making my point here. That
Yeah.
look, Windows Phone could have had app gap being the only issue, it would have still failed. Like
I mean, one of the big
app gap
reasons. Yeah.
is the core of the mobile experience. That is the one thing you need to get right. Everything else can come after. As long as you've got the apps, then we're going somewhere.
There were plenty of reports of the frontline people in phone stores purposely ignoring, downselling, and just their own personal bias. A customer comes in like, "Hey, I need a new smartphone." It's like, "Oh, here's a new iPhone and here's a new Samsung. Oh, what about those Windows phones?" You don't want that. There are tons of documented cases like that. And then the people, in Infinite Wisdom, like, just pay all the store reps to push Windows Phone, and they did. AT&T would give bonuses and stuff like that. They did that for a while, but this gets into the Microsoft. Just pay to be popular, right? Just pay everybody to use your phones, pay everybody to sell your phones, developers, pay devs to make apps for your phone. Like, it just became like this money pit of like, this wasn't working. So there's a billion reasons there.
What is the plan with Windows Core OS? Will it be the future of Windows Phone? I'm going to say no. It won't. It stemmed out of trying to be a mobile OS, but Microsoft is done making Windows phones, unfortunately. Someone else is asking, asking about the power of the Surface Neo and all that good stuff. We don't really know, right? Like, we weren't allowed to play. We're allowed to hold the device, but we wasn't allowed to sort of use it. So, we don't know. We couldn't like type on anything or anything. We were basically have to just sort of hold the devices and just feel the hinges, but not allowed to interact with them. Right, a couple more questions, and then I am going to have to run. Do you think Google and Microsoft will work together on the future of Android or mobile OS? I think, yeah. And Microsoft already confirmed that they're working closely with Google on the Surface Duo. Yeah, I don't know if Microsoft will sort of take Android under its wing and start contributing to Android AOSP as a whole. I don't think so. But we'll see. I will see. Baby steps. Let's see Microsoft get it right with the Surface Duo first, and then we can talk about making Android a better place for everyone.
Could the Microsoft Sony partnership give the Duo some nice Sony sensors? I mean, yeah, but so the problem with the camera stuff, it's not just the sensors. I think they could.
It's the software.
Yeah, they could definitely procure nice sensors and even nice hardware. And was it the Zeiss lenses? Everybody, the Zeiss lenses to me was always a gimmick. I never really. I'm sure they're a little bit nicer, but this was never like that. Didn't really that didn't make the Lumias Lumias. What made the Lumias was Yuha's amazing work on the algorithms and the software side and the processing of stuff. That's what actually did it all. And so they have to look at the hardware, the sensor size, of course, the lenses a little bit, but it's really going to be about the software stack and what they can do there. That's where the magic happens. If you look at the iPhone 11's Deep Fusion, 100% software. That's actually machine learning using a special chip. Like that's not anymore the camera hardware. So that's where everything is going now. In that sense, though, hey, Microsoft does machine learning. They have some powerful cloud computing. They may have some tricks up their sleeves. So I'm not saying it's it's a dead end for them, but just procuring good sensors won't solve this problem. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this debate.
Wait, did we see this, Dan? The founder of Mixer's leaving Microsoft.
I did not see that. I just got a news break that Shepard Smith is leaving Fox News.
Oh. Oh, Matt and Jez saw it, so I guess we must have written something, I hope.
That's interesting. I mean, he's young. He's young as hell.
I mean, he's a millionaire. He made a quick buck from Microsoft. Now he's moving on. I bloody would. I'm
sure what happened was, I mean, once Microsoft acquired it, he probably,
Listen, you build a product, and if it sells for like $1 million, then you're done, right? Like, yeah, cool. Here you have it. I'll stick around for a little while, but I'm good.
Yeah, I'm sure being a kid, and I don't use that as a pejorative. But he is young. But being young and working with Microsoft, I'm sure there's like a lot of like 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds, old people like me coming in and being like, so, and eventually you probably feel like you're just sort of out-peered, whereas that started off as like a project with him and his friends, stuff like that. So I don't blame him. Plus, yeah, he's rich, he's young, he's smart. He may want to try something new, like why not?
I think that's it. I don't think we've got any more questions. You got anything else, Dan? Or are we done?
Let's see. I'm looking at Mixer. Heard a few people left Microsoft, 2 from the Xbox team with us, Mike Ybarra, who actually joins us a lot in this podcast. And I want to say, I recommended him both my Xbox One zipper hoodie, zipper jumper thing, and the Huawei MateBook laptop, and he enjoys both of those. So, yeah, he's leaving to go start a new chapter. We talked about that on the podcast, so go check it out if you have that. We also wish Mike the best. Do you think Snapdragon 8CX leads to success because still don't have received many devices? Well, it hasn't been released yet. It is, I would say, behind production, but you do have the new Samsung laptop that comes out in November, again, pushed back a bit, along with the Pro X, which will have it. But this is a slow burn, folks. ARM was never going to be taking over the Windows industry, but it's gaining momentum, and I believe probably Qualcomm will have more information about their future in PC stuff in December, as they've always done for the last few years. So stay tuned for that. And I think that does it for me. I'm going to go grab a lunch and finish writing this review. By the way, that reminds me, I should have the review for the XPS 13 2-in-1 sometime early next week. So go check that out.
Oh, did you know it's Panos Panay's birthday today?
I did not.
It's Panos Panay's birthday. Happy birthday if you're listening. He's probably not. All right. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll be back same time, same place next Friday. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated on when we're going live, etc., etc. Goodbye.